So to get started, first, I just want to thank you for meeting with us today. You're very busy, as you said, you're traveling. So to start off, we'll just do like some brief introductions between ourselves. My name is Samartha. I'm originally from Philly. My major is I'm doing a master's in information science, concentrating on user experience research and design. And Amelia, you wanna go?
Yeah, my name's Amelia. I'm originally from New Jersey, but I live in South Carolina now. I'm a junior at U of M studying sociology and minoring in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and we have 4 other members, but unfortunately, just time conflicts, they weren't able to be here today. But if you want, we can always send like our bios to you afterwards to get it, just so you get acquainted with us.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds good. And nice to see that you're both from the Northeast. I'm originally from New York and I live in Philly now, so familiar with all the area.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, so to begin, can you just give us a brief introduction of you and the company, like your current role you have right now, and how long you've been working there?
For sure. So my current role is CEO and co-founder. I joined the founding team in 2013 as I was finishing up my master's in education program at the Harvard Ed School. And at the time, I was just myself and my co-founder. I focused mostly on the operational side of the organization, building out the programming and setting up the infrastructure for the kind of community side, education side of the work. And then 5 years ago, my original co-founder decided to move on from the organization to go back to school. He was 18, 19 when we started, so he really wanted to go back and get a master's and went to get his MBA. So in that moment, I moved from COO to CEO and have been in that role since.
Okay.
Awesome. So if you have any, like, if you could talk about like the motivation and what's like kind of like motivated you to start Learn Fresh, that'd be really interesting.
For sure. So the origin of the organization is really rooted around a board game. So the NBA Math Hoops program, at the heart of that, is a game that is played in classrooms, after school programs across the country. The game itself infuses NBA, WNBA player statistics into a basketball-like environment for the classroom. And the game itself was first built by a math teacher from San Diego, California, starting in 1997. So he was building this product in his classroom just out of personal interest. He saw that his students were excited about sports as a vehicle for learning math. He, as a math teacher, thought that was one of the more interesting applications of math and kind of the lives of his students. So he is, in terms of the specific kind of work that we do and the specific core programs that we run, that is really the origin of the idea. Personally, I actually got my start in music education, but when I was a kid, I learned all my math, all my statistics, etc., through sports as well. It was a personal interest, and it's something that was a motivator for me. When I stepped into the math class, I knew that I could take that learning and apply it back to something that I was excited about when I went home after school. And through music education, I kind of built up this appreciation for learning that was connected to your interests and your passions. And a lot of times in our schooling system, when students choose to go into music education, they do that, as a choice. Like, it's not something that's required, right? And so you're participating in that because you care about it and you love it and you want to put time into it. And so that the spirit of that definitely motivated me to find opportunities to contribute in the space that would connect student interest and connect students' kind of pure motivations with the content that they were learning on a day-to-day basis. And so that kind of lens, that personal purpose, motivated me personally when I met the original inventor of the game, my co-founders, and collectively there was this energy to build some sort of broader infrastructure around this product that this teacher had created. A little bit of extra context, and then I'll stop talking. The the extra kind of like secret sauce to how the organization got started is, our founding board chair, one of the co-founders, is a former executive at the NBA. And so he saw this game and realized that he had kind of the power, the connections, the influence to be able to get the league to buy into something that was really unproven at the time, but showed a lot of promise for what it could do for students on broader scale. And so his connections, the original teacher's creation, my experience in education with programming and infrastructure development, and my co-founder's kind of pitch-based spirit and how he could get people to kind of buy into an idea. The four of us were really the core components to the initial start of the organization.
Oh, that's awesome. And then this kind of going into it, who would you say is the community that you guys are trying to serve with this organization?
Yeah, so there are a number of different communities. The student community is predominantly K-12. For our history to date has been predominantly elementary and middle school. And we're specifically focused on supporting students within low-income communities, students in communities of color, girls as a population that's traditionally been underrepresented in STEM careers and in STEM pipelines nationwide. And then educators kind of connected to students are really a direct constituency for the organization. When we implement our programs, it's not like we're going to students directly and saying, hey, participate in MBA Math Hoops. We're equipping educators to leverage the programs that we have in their specific learning spaces. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're just trying to make existing learning spaces more fun. So the educator community is a big part of our outreach, both in school and after school. And they're really the ones that we build direct relationships with when we're starting to think about scaling programming in a specific area. Another community that we work with and support is the kind of corporate philanthropic community within professional sports organizations. We don't, and we could talk about our revenue model separately, but we don't charge teachers or students for participation in our core sports-based programs. We donate the programs, the program experiences, the materials to use in class at no cost. And so for us, our earned revenue actually comes from teams giving us money to implement programming in their community. And our value proposition to them has basically been that we have a much more rigorous, more intensively analyzed, evaluated, assessed program that can create positive change in their communities. And it's better than them putting that money into donating backpacks or something like that, kind of ad hoc to whichever students they can find. And so for us, we've created a value proposition where we can do the lift in terms of community engagement for the teams, and then they can just put their brand into it and let us kind of turn that into good.
Yeah, so you talked about how obviously you work really closely with the teams and how you're in a unique position to where you can work with the teams. Did you originally test any other ideas of just being a part of the MBA or a part of some of those teams as opposed to a separate organization? Can you talk a little bit about how you came to that, the idea of being a separate organization as opposed to just a part of either the leagues or the teams themselves?
Definitely. That's a really good question. And it's something that came up at numerous points throughout our startup years. So when we were founded, our nonprofit entity was originally called Math Hoops Inc. And the NBA basically said to us, we don't want you to be that because you seem too much like us. More or less, they perceived that there was some risk to having this completely unproven thing with these really young co-founders and this kind of random teacher connected to the brand of the league. And so they didn't want that to be something that they would have to carry. They wanted it to be something that would be separate. So if we failed, they wouldn't really have to deal with it, more or less. I know that sounds like kind of opportunistic, but it's just what made the most sense for them as a kind of highly cautious global brand. And so that motivated us to think about how we could set up an organization that had some sense of purpose that was bigger than or more diverse than just the perspective of the MBA. And that vision for Learn Fresh, which is our entity, right, is really the product of myself and my co-founder Khalil. We sat down and we said, what do we believe? Like, what do we believe about this starting point that we have, and what do we believe about where we think it can go? And so we put together this vision for building an organization that envisions a world in which students find learning so fun that they want to do it all the time. And that can happen through a range of touch points across a range of subjects. We put parameters around that work to focus specifically on STEM, sports, and entertainment. And we're starting to now, over the last 3 to 4 years, build out additional products and programs that help to expand beyond just the basketball program.
Okay. And you mentioned how you guys were kind of like young entrepreneurs trying to pitch this company to the MBA, but you really didn't have any leverage or evidence that this type of program would be beneficial or that it would work. So how did you go about evaluating your program and making sure and providing the metrics that was needed to showcase that this is a great program to implement?
Yeah, so before we launched our model that directly engaged individual teams in their local communities, we did a national pilot study in conjunction with the American Institutes for Research to basically get a handle on what the impact or outcomes of the program could look like in some sort of structured classroom environment. And so that study took place in 2012. And then basically every year since then, as we started growing the program with a more specific geographic focus, we would implement kind of pre-post studies, some sort of, I wouldn't necessarily say quasi-experimental study, but at least evaluation that included students who were participating in a comparison group on an annual basis, really through today. We were really lucky in our founding in that, again, just kind of one of those coincidental things, but the lead or one of the lead math researchers at the American Institutes for Research was Tyson Chandler, famous NBA player, Tyson Chandler's middle school basketball coach. And so he was a math teacher, basketball coach, taught in the classroom for a number of years, left, became a researcher, and ended up finding us. And he helped us really build this strong evaluation program from our founding. This past year, we have evolved that to take the next step. I'm traveling right now because I'm about to meet with a school district to talk about doing an RCT, a randomized controlled trial study starting in the fall. But we are going to be launching an RCT through our own internal staff. We have a PhD on staff now who's the director of program evaluation. And so we've started to really evolve what it means for us to track and measure the outcomes of the program.
Okay. And just kind of trickling back on like how the company started, how did you determine that STEM was the way to go about, was a problem, and how to go about solving that? Like, how did you determine what your problem was for your key customers and how to improve that?
I would say that it was somewhat circumstantial. There is significant and persistent data around STEM outcomes for students across different demographic groups in the U.S. And so that information, that data, particularly with math education, is something that we've referenced over time to justify the focus of our work. But I would be lying if I said that we're not doing STEM because of the fact that the original product that the teacher created was a math game, right? And so we stumbled on that just as a result of the product that we were given to start with. I will say though that STEM has a very natural connection with sport. Obviously, like data and statistics are intrinsically tied with most sports, particularly in the U.S. And on top of that, we are looking now at options to not drift too far from the mission, but to maybe infuse a little bit of literacy learning into our programs. Social emotional learning has always been a big part of all of our programs. So as we age a little bit, we are starting to think about how to diversify the offerings that we have to just create more options for our teachers.
All right, perfect. So moving on a little bit to more about how the organization actually like functions. You talked about how obviously you pair with different school districts and different teachers. How do you like get in contact with those people, and how do you like create those partnerships, whether it's this with the school districts or the individual teachers?
There are a few different modes of connecting with them. So the original structure that we launched with when we were very small is partnering with a specific professional sports organization. So our first one was the Cleveland Cavaliers in Ohio. We partnered with the team. They set up introductions to the school system, both in Cleveland and in some of the surrounding areas. They set up, connections with our with out-of-school time providers in the area, whether that be Boys and Girls Club or YMCA, City Year, etc. And then we would just cultivate individual kind of one-off relationships with each of those partners to build a sense of trust and a sense of kind of connectivity within a local area. And then each year after, we would complete a season, we'd start to kind of enjoy the benefit of like word of mouth, where either an education partner would hear from a colleague in a different city and say, oh, we were using this program, we'd love to bring it from Cleveland to Denver. Or, the Warriors would hear about Cleveland using the program and they'd want to bring our work to San Francisco. So we kind of started to build this like network effect of people within education and within sports hearing about our program and wanting it to grow. And that helped us move from region to region. In the last 4 years, as that has become less relevant, I guess, as we've started to kind of fill up the map from a team standpoint, we've done more work to build out relationships with national organizations to supplement the work that we're doing locally. So now, like, the Math Eats program is a preferred math program for the Boys and Girls Club of America, for City Year, for YMCA, for like Texas education agencies, like these big state level networks and organizations. And then we're also attending more conferences. So a lot of educators, both school day and after school, go to conferences to find the programs that they want to use with their kids. So like later this week, I'll be in Orlando for a conference. We'll be presenting there, and then we'll be exhibiting there so educators can find the programs through that as well. So really, it's become a comprehensive slate of options where we're working in, at national, regional, local levels to build and retain these relationships.
So do you consider the teams and the organizations like the NBA and like the Warriors, for example, your customers, or do you consider like the educators or even the students or even the bigger organizations? Who do you consider your main like customers or customer segments?
Yeah, I think that from a financial standpoint, I mean, the teams are the customers, if you want to define it like a traditional sense. But from a implementation standpoint, the educators are critically important, because if they're not excited about the program that we have to offer, they're not going to use it, and then we're not going to be able to generate the revenue from the team. So I think it's a little bit of both. The teams have an interest in what outcomes are we seeing from the educator community, from the student community, and what are the activations that they can run. So we do like these tournaments in arena. We do STEM workshops with the teams and their employees and players and students. So what is kind of the visibility, or like what is the richness of that experience? That's on the team side. And then the teachers and students care about, how engaging the program is. Is it something that they want to keep doing on a weekly basis? And just, what are the learning outcomes? So I do think it is a balance.
So just talking about like the main services that you guys do provide, What are they? And you mentioned that it's on a weekly basis. Is that how each program is at every school or every institution, or do some programs have meet more than once a week? How does that work?
Our recommended structure when we train educators or introduce educators to our program is to use curriculum, 1 to 2 times a week for, 45 to 90 minutes. So during the school day, if a math teacher is using the program in their classroom, the structure is really helpful, but they'll probably use it once for 45 minutes, like during one class period. If we're talking about the after school space, which is where a lot of our usage happens, probably 60% of all usage is in out of school time programs. They'll often participate in the program, run the program, multiple times a week because they have the time and flexibility to do that. And then our overarching structure, the pacing of the program within any specific education space, in any classroom, within any Boys and Girls Club, that's really up to the teacher. Like, we provide guidance and we provide suggestions based upon what we've experienced and seen, but they make the final choice on that. We provide an overarching structure with each of our programs that allows the educator to kind of plug into our regional, local, or national community at any point in time. So we run teacher trainings for our programs for new educators 12 months out of the year. During sports seasons, so like right now we're in the NBA season, we'll run these STEM events from, say, December through March, where educators and their students in the local community can earn or sign up for opportunities to engage with players, engage with in different STEM related experiences. And then we also run a series of tournaments every year that allow students to celebrate their work and actually go to the arena, compete in NBA math hoops, so on and so forth.
Okay. And as far as training goes, like, say there's a new educator who's interested in implementing your program at their school or after school program, what are the steps that they have to go through to do that? And how long do they have to go for training?
Yeah, we try to keep that very simple. So the training process for our most intensive programs is between 60 and 90 minutes. We'll sometimes do them in person, particularly if they're hosted by a team. We'll do them remotely too, so we offer kind of virtual training online 12 months out of the year. And then our newer programs, we're trying to build all of our newer experiences to be as lightweight from a training standpoint as possible. So some of them you could get access to the game, start playing in 10 minutes, and then just participate in or leverage virtual resources, videos, tutorial videos, things like that to get started. So yeah, we try and keep it as lightweight as possible for them.
Okay. And then what would you say are some key features that makes the program like appealing to students, educators, and like your other customers, as far as like the I think you kind of touched on the MBA and how that it makes it appealing for them. But for educators and students, what would you say makes your program more appealing for them?
For sure. From that perspective, I think it's just the ability to bring a content that's relevant from an interest standpoint, content that's connected to some sort of community-based entity into the classroom, and content that's game-based, right? So in math in particular, like if you look at math learning experiences in 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, a lot of them still can feel very stale. I mean, there are some virtual learning platforms that students now use that are more engaging, but to create a face-to-face, in-person live learning experience that allows students to feel as excited as they would, at a concert for our newest program that's focused on entertainment, or on a basketball court, in these spaces that they're participating in kind of outside of the classroom. That's a really unique thing. So the value proposition is really to create an experience that has a certain kind of emotional richness that's just different than what math education normally looks like.
Yeah, so you talked a little bit about how you like acquire the new customers with like the teams and the organizations. How do you keep the customers that you already have, whether that's like the organizations, the teams, or the educators themselves?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the last question?
Yeah, so you talked a little bit about how you like acquire new customers by like using the teams and the organizations, but have you had any difficulty like keeping the customers, whether that's the MBA teams or the league teams themselves or the individual educators? Have they like come back pretty easily, or have you had to put in some effort to like maintain them year after year?
Gotcha. Yeah. So the biggest challenge is just the turnover, particularly through COVID. There was a significant amount of educator turnover. We probably had somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 or 4 out of every 10 teachers in our system leave their organization or leave their profession. So that's a challenge. So we're often retraining educators from the same schools or organizations. At the organization level, we don't have much turnover at all. So like once a school or a Boys and Girls Club network or whatever is in the program, they'll usually want to keep participating. And that's, 95, 97% plus retention at that level. It's just making sure that we can continually support the new teachers and the new adults who are coming into their spaces. On the team side, again, things have been very, very consistent. The only hurdle that we sometimes have to overcome is when a specific staff member or staff team has a kind of massive turnover, experiences massive turnover within a given year. So, an example of that, the corporate partnerships department at the New Orleans Pelicans completely turned over in the last year, and so all of the staff that we had worked with left, went to work with other teams in other places. Now that opened up an opportunity for us to start doing work in a different place where they were, because they knew us and trusted us. But that created a problem for us in New Orleans because the corporate sponsor that we had worked with left because the staff left and they didn't feel like they could be effectively serviced by the organization anymore. And then the new staff came in, had to be completely re-educated on the program, and then now they're working to get a new sponsor. So that has created a bit of a hurdle, but fortunately that doesn't happen too often in too many places.
Yeah, and then adding on to that, I imagine that like communications with the teams and organizations are a little bit easier than with the individual teachers, but do you have any outlet for getting their feedback on how the programs are working, or if they have any like suggestions on that? Do you have any outlet for the teacher feedback?
Yeah, so as part of the evaluation program, the evaluation system that we run, there are teacher feedback instruments that are implemented after the training at the beginning of the program, and then after the program is executed, so we can collect feedback on an annual basis in that way as well.
And do you track like certification at all? Like how do you measure? I'm guessing that's part of the evaluation as well. But what actions have you taken to like ensure that customers are satisfied, whether that be from the teams or the educators down to the students?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a multi-dimensional answer. So a lot of it on the team side is just working with each individual team on an annual basis to customize the program to what they need. So that may look like adding in certain branding into a certain element of the program or changing the event structure for an event that we run. That's very easy though, because there's only a set number of teams and our staff has to communicate with them on a regular basis to execute the program anyways. So that's kind of an ongoing feedback loop. For the educators, I would say that approach has changed over time. So we used to do this in-person summit every year with teachers where we would bring a large group, 20 to 30 educators from across the country to a location and help us brainstorm how we can modify the program structure, the event structure, the resources for the classroom to, kind of make the experience as effective and as applicable for their space as possible. Over time, there was a point in time where we were doing it and we just kind of felt like the returns that we were getting from that system weren't matching the investment that we were making. Just because over time we kind of got more effective. We became more effective at the program just got stronger over time and the changes were getting smaller, and then B, we got more effective at anticipating teachers' needs by just doing the program over and over again and monitoring those feedback systems that I had mentioned that were in place. So because of that, we stopped doing that large in-person gathering, but we've created other instruments. So we'll do focus groups with teachers when we're, at championship tournaments at the end of the year. We'll do focus groups with students. And so that combined with, our online feedback system that's connected to a website that teachers can access for resources, that connected with the kind of surveys that we do after training and after the program, gives us this big picture of information that we can constantly use to update and refine the program.
Are these focus groups and surveys, are they done in-house or are you sourcing it out?
So we do them internally just so we can get a steady stream of information. But we've also commissioned, like AIR, the organization that I mentioned before, WestEd, which is another major research organization, to do studies on our behalf so that we can get a third-party analysis and use that independent information as well. I would say that the information that we get doesn't really change between the two, but there is value in investing in that third-party research so that we have the ability to speak to that and share those reports with folks, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so I guess transitioning into like how you guys make money, you talked about how the league and the teams obviously give you money to like implement these programs. Are there any other sources of like income or any other ways that you guys actually like get the money to implement their programs?
Yeah, we're a nonprofit entity, so it doesn't look significantly different than other nonprofits. But I would say our balance in terms of where the money's coming from is probably a little bit different. So about 30 to 35% of the revenue that we generate in a given year comes from our team partners. There is a significant chunk of revenue that is basically contributed in kind through licenses, through game production. Like we don't pay to produce any of the game units that we distribute to classrooms. They're all donated to us by Hasbro. We don't pay for access to the league licenses on the MLB side, the NBA side, so on and so forth. All of those licenses are donated to Learn Fresh. So that's another chunk of revenue that does hit our books, that goes on our 990, but is not paid for on our end. And then, the remainder of our cash budget, the remaining, 60 to 70% or so, is from philanthropy. A smaller percentage, probably around 10 to 15%, is from individual donors, people who are willing to send in a contribution for $100, $1,000, $5,000. And then a larger percentage of that, probably around 50 to 60% or so, is from institutional philanthropy and corporate philanthropy. So we have a number of significant relationships with foundations and corporations. The Overdeck Family Foundation in New York just committed a 3-year, $3 million grant to help scale our program staff and our evaluation systems. There are numerous examples kind of in the foundation lane, and then companies like AT&T, State Farm, Chevron, Accenture, a lot of these companies that are working in STEM fields, they've also made significant 6-figure investments in the work too.
Now, do you market to these companies, or how are they finding out about to donate as far as the philanthropy part?
We do. So we have an internal development staff that does all the fundraising work. And so most of these companies will publish or publicize, what their philanthropic priorities are through their foundation or through their CSR arm. And then there's some sort of portal to be able to apply, and we'll usually work to network with them beforehand so that we know we can get some leverage in that process. There are other examples where we kind of enter through circumstantial relationships. AT&T is an example. They ran an education accelerator for a number of years, and our organization participated in that. And then basically since then, they've looked to create opportunities to partner with us around specific projects on an annual basis. So their commitment to us is kind of born out of us being a part of this accelerator program that incubated the organization, and then they take pride in helping to see us grow over time. So it just really depends.
Okay. And then what would you say is like your main costs, main expenses that needs to be paid in order for us to operate successfully?
Our number one expense is definitely salaries. So our full-time headcount is 17 right now. And that's where we choose to invest the majority of our money, because or the largest percentage of our money, because that's where, that's really what powers our work, is relationships, right? Relationships with the teams, relationships with the educators. And so we want to make sure that the people who are building those relationships feel well compensated and feel taken care of by the organization. And then the next biggest chunk of the budget is the cost of executing events, the cost of travel. It is expensive to go across the country and go to conferences and go to events with all these different teams. It's just part of what our model is. And so that is a substantial expense. And then the other biggest expense that has ramped up in the last 4 years is digital development. So we have a digital version of the NBA Math Hoops game now. That's an app. We've invested a lot in taking care of that product as a separate vehicle for engaging students. We've invested a lot in our educator support website, which really helps to automate a lot of the training and support functions that we provide to teachers, and has allowed us to scale more efficiently. So digital development is in the top 3 in terms of expenses as well.
So looking at like key suppliers and like partners that you might work with, you talked about like the digital development side. Is that something that you're doing in-house, or is that something that you've had to outsource?
That's fully outsourced. We tried to do that in-house in 2015, 2016 or so. And basically we just found that, especially at that point in our growth when we were a bit smaller, it was hard for us to sustain the cost of that salary expense internally, and get really all the expertise that we needed across all the different kinds of development that we needed to do, all the different technical skills that we needed to execute our projects. So we ended up moving away from that model. We took a couple of years off of digital development. And then when the pandemic hit, we were really forced to invest again. And fortunately, philanthropy was willing to move with us. So we started getting to this healthy rhythm of investing in projects, seeing the fruits of that work kind of unfold over the course of a year. And then that would set us up to make the next investment, to get philanthropic support for the next investment. So we're at a point now where we have a really healthy relationship with a development partner based out of Oklahoma City. They're relatively low cost in comparison to other parts of the country. And they know our work really well. So they've built a number of different projects for us. And they've been able to really get to the point where they almost feel like they're part of our team. Like they're embedded in our Slack channel. They communicate with our staff on a weekly basis. It's like having staff, but we don't have to pay for them as staff.
And then looking at like key activities that you guys engage with, obviously, aside from like the programs and obviously like the main aspects of the organization, are there any other like key activities that you guys see yourself engaging in with like innovation and success as like the main goal?
We've started to do more program R&D, I guess you can call it. So we have been building out other experiences. We have a national program with the Major League Baseball Players Association now. We have a soccer program that we're about to launch nationally with the MLS. We have an entertainment-focused program that is about to go into a pilot study this year. So we are getting to the point now where we have this really strong base, both on the educator side, on the financial side, and we're starting to leverage that to build other experiences that can help to broaden our network. As part of that, we're also seeing these new programs as a potential source of revenue. A bunch of our sports-based programs, because of their structure, don't necessarily allow us to charge educators and students, and that is a core part of our mission, is to provide as much to the education partners at no cost as we can. But over time, as we build out a kind of like a slate of programs, a menu of programs, there may be opportunities for us to have some of those programs, not all, but some of them be paid for by the education partners directly. And so we're thinking about what that looks like. We have not done that yet, but it's an opportunity that's there for us.
And when you do set shop in like a new place, what are some key things that you need to have at that new location? Like, is there a certain amount of educators that you need to have there? Anything that you need to send to them? Things of that sort that they need to be successful in executing these programs?
In terms of local infrastructure, I would say there's not a ton that we need to be successful at this stage in our growth, just because we're working across most of the country, and at some point, there are definitely regional tendencies in terms of how people approach education, in terms of their just way of doing business. But at this point, we're pretty familiar with all of the different regions in the U.S. So when we distribute our programs at this stage, it's in a very nationally minded way. Any teacher anywhere can access our work. We have a very straightforward system for onboarding them. Not too much differentiation from region to region. We have started doing some international work. So we have pilot programs that have evolved into full-fledged partnerships in South Africa, in Johannesburg specifically, in Melbourne, Australia. And in those partnerships, we make sure that we have a regional education partner on the ground that can really support the training, implementation, oversight of the work, because one, we don't really want to staff those regions directly. It's not part of our model to make that investment. And we also don't want to assume that we have the knowledge to operate effectively in any other place, especially very early on in a partnership. And so we always make sure that we have a local partner to help support implementation.
Okay. And for the program to go, do the educators just need access to like the internet, or are there any like books or anything that they need to have, or the games? Do they need to be supplied with those or anything?
Yeah. So when a teacher starts up, we'll send them, after they're trained, we'll send them the physical games that they need for their group. So usually, 6 copies, 8 copies, depending upon the size of their class. And then everything else can be accessed online, including the digital version of the game, all of the curriculum that comes along with the games, all of our support resources. So really the only thing, if they're using the physical version of the game, is to get those copies, and then they're good to go.
So going off of that, looking at key resources, obviously like the games themselves, the programs, the people that you work with, but do you have any like copyrights or trademarks or patents on any of the programs that you have, to where like the intellectual property would also be a resource that you use?
Yeah. So our brands are, because they're league affiliated, they're trademarked, or for the NBA, I'm assuming that they have their brand trademarked, but it might just be copyrighted. But those brands are within the family of brands owned by the league. So like the NBA Math Hoops brand, we don't technically own it. We're just licensed the ability to use it. And then the products, depending upon who created the original game or curriculum, either are our intellectual property that's copyrighted, or the copyright of the inventor. So I mentioned at the very beginning that the Math Hoops board game was created by a math educator independently. He still owns the intellectual property for that, and we licensed that from him to implement the program. Our soccer program, we created that. We own that intellectual property. Same thing with the entertainment program, so on and so forth. So the ownership of IP is a little varied depending upon what part of the organization you're talking about.
So that license that you have from the person who created the original game and from the NBA, are those licenses that only you hold, or are there other organizations or groups that also like share that license with?
Only us, and it's an exclusive license, so he's not able to license it to anyone else.
Okay.
And then are there any other key technologies that you use, like any apps or anything like that that might be able to be downloaded or anything like that that you use for the business?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are a bunch. Probably the most critical ones are Slack. So like, because we're a fully remote company, so all of our staff are all across the country, and we have no office. We're 100% dispersed. So we have a very rich Slack culture that allows us to communicate on a day-to-day basis, and then we see each other at events throughout the year and at our team retreats and our big national events. We use QuickBooks for all of our financials, obviously, so that's a major one. There's some more niche things that we use for like tracking fundraising. We use Salesforce for tracking all of our donors. Those are the major ones.
Okay.
And then going off of that, you obviously talked about how you're completely remote, like all you guys are spread all around. So how does that like affect how the business is organized? You talked to there's maybe like 15 to 20 employees. So like being remote, does that impact like how the business is organized at all?
Not really. We probably have more like state level licenses or bureaucracy to deal with than most organizations our size. But aside from that, it doesn't change too much. And this is how we've always been structured since we were founded. So it's been, the organizational culture has been built out in this space. And so anyone who's become a part of the organization has only known this way of working with us. So that has made it pretty natural. It's not something that we had to force our way into as a result of COVID or anything like that. And then another interesting note just to share is that all of our program staff, which is the largest part of our team, they've all participated in our programs as educators before joining us. It's not been set up that way, or at least it wasn't set up that way intentionally at the beginning of the hiring process, but it's just so happened to be that a lot of our educators have wanted to come on board. And so it's created this interesting dynamic where all the folks in the program team are coming from different parts of the country. They've all had their own experiences implementing our program, but they know a bit about our culture and our purpose and the way that our staff communicates before they ever join us. And so they're able to seamlessly integrate into the team in a way that helps the remote situation, just because there's a bit of familiarity there before they get started.
Is that hiring method something that you're looking to continue in the future, or would you be open to like opening it up to people who weren't originally a part of the program?
We have opened it up regularly for program staff. It just happens to be that every time we go through the interviews, and like the people that we end up liking the best are people who've participated before. So we'll keep it open, and we'll see how things shake out. All the other staff though, like our marketing, development, fundraising, operations staff, they have been more independent. There have been some pre-existing relationships that have filled a few roles. Our chief of staff was actually our project manager for the first stages of development for the NBA Athletes mobile app. So we just happened to build a really strong relationship with her, and then she became available as we were hiring for that chief of staff role. But most other people on that wing of the organization have not had a relationship, and they've been, integrated just as seamlessly into the work. So I don't necessarily have a preference one way or another.
What would you say are like the main like organizational functions of the business? Like if you had like an org chart, what are the major roles?
So the programmatic work, including the team partnerships and the implementation of programs, is all in-house, and so that's the largest function. Product development and product maintenance is the second biggest function. That includes curriculum design and game design, and then just making sure that the materials are maintained the right way over time, updated as needed. And then fundraising is kind of the third big function that happens in-house. All of our accounting work, all of our bookkeeping, auditing, obviously, but just the regular bookkeeping is all done externally. So we have a firm that supplies us with 2 accountants and a part-time CFO, and they manage all the financials in conjunction with me and my COO. And then all the digital development work, like I said, is done externally through that team that we've created this really kind of symbiotic relationship with. And then aside from that, there aren't too many other functions. We do have an HR relationship with a company called Insperity. They provide us with all of our payroll and a really comprehensive benefit service. And then our in-house contact for that is our chief of staff, who helps manage the org chart. So yeah, that's pretty much the way it's broken down.
Okay, so before anyone goes off to talk about the competition, just quick question: what is like your annual revenue that you get for the company?
Yeah, so it's about $5 million a year right now. We are anticipating that increasing to a little over $6 million this year, and our goal is to be at around $10 million by 2025.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so like Samartha said, we're going to be moving to like the competition and other like competitors in the field. So if you guys weren't already partnered with the NBA and the individual teams, like are there other competitors that you guys have? Are there other partners who do have some type of similar programs, or like what experience do you have with some of those competitors?
There are a few. One of the interesting things is that the different STEM-based organizations and education-based organizations that are in the space all kind of have their own little niche that they focus on. So one that is top of mind is called Spiro Sports, and they're actually a for-profit company. They're not a nonprofit. They focus on coding. So they're in a lane that's pretty distinct and different than us. There's another organization called Science of Sport, and they're less game-based, but they're more kind of like this experiential, like use the materials around you, like baseball bats and basketballs, so on and so forth, to create science learning experiences. I would say the biggest differentiator between us and those organizations is that our programs take the actual brand of the teams and the players and the leagues, and we infuse it into the actual thing that the student is holding or engaging with when they're participating. And so that allows us to require that we get a license from our partner, our league partner, to launch the program. And in doing that, the interesting wrinkle to this is that these leagues don't give away these licenses usually. And so the NBA doing that, the NBA donating that license to us in perpetuity, has created a reference point for us to go to other sports, go to other leagues and say, hey, the NBA is doing this. Can you do it too? So we've had success with MLB. We've had success with MLS. And that is a really exclusive thing that we kind of get our hands on, and then we're able to leverage that in a way that the other organizations can't. So that's a big part of it. And then I would say the other big differentiator is just that these other programs are not super rigorously evaluated. The for-profit ones tend to really focus on just pumping out access to their product for cost to the teacher. And then the other nonprofit ones are very loose in their construction. Like they don't do a lot of research studies. They're not very well, they don't communicate their impact very well beyond just kind of like big numbers of students reach. So that has become over time a bigger and bigger differentiator for us.
Okay, and if your program wasn't didn't exist, aside from those competitors, what are some alternatives that you believe that your customers would use or go about doing to meet the needs of to meet the needs of the educators and the students?
Mhm.
Or even like the customers too, as far as like the MBA, what are some alternatives that you think that they would go about meeting like their philanthropic mission?
Yeah, I would say that there's definitely no shortage of community-based entities for teams and leagues to engage with, and there's no shortage of math programs for teachers to use. So I think there are lots of substitutes. That being said, though, we create a really easy excuse for teams and leagues to want to partner with us because their brand's in it. And so when they think about, the idea of their community impact also representing their identity, we're the easiest thing that they could possibly choose to partner with. And so it feels very automatic for them from that standpoint. And so if there's an interest in education, if there's an interest in STEM education, we've become a pretty big no-brainer for that group. And then on the educator side, I mean, I think, what we see is that the composition of the program, whether it's the sports angle, the game-based angle, if there's some sort of connection to that mode of learning or that theme of learning between the teacher and the program, then they'll choose to bring it to their students. And if there isn't, they may be more reluctant to do that. And so I feel like people are already differentiating us one way or another. And if we weren't there, they just wouldn't have the option. They would just pick something else, People are already kind of self-selecting us because they believe in the way of learning that we present.
So looking forward, what do you think some of like the biggest challenges that you foresee are either facing currently or you're foreseeing facing in the near future?
The biggest challenge is definitely balancing growth financially with growth programmatically. We've continued to be in demand and in growing demand on the educator side. And so that creates more and more opportunities for us to proliferate access to our programs. That growth requires more people internally, and that growth requires more money to support the people. So we've been able to manage it very well over the last few years. We've built up kind of a running 7-figure kind of cash surplus that we carry year to year as a little bit of a safety net. But like I said, we want to build the budget up to 10 million a year. We want to build our reach from 350,000 students a year up to 1 million students a year, and we want to increase our headcount from 17 to 37 by 2026. So there's a lot of growth that we envision for the organization. The financial sustainability, the financial the access to kind of financial resources to make that happen is the most critical thing.
Okay. And I guess you kind of touched on this, but just to ask again, looking forward, what are some of the biggest opportunities that your company is looking to do?
So we're comfortable with where the basketball and baseball programs are as national experiences, and we just want to continue to offer them to as many educators as we can. The big new opportunities, I would say, are one, to launch a national version of our soccer program and scale that. Launch the Eco Tour program, which is the entertainment program that I've been referencing. And that program is specifically focused on leveraging a performing artist tour to teach students about financial literacy and environmental sustainability. So that product, that game, is something that we're going to be piloting this year, and then are going to start to scale in conjunction with performing artists in 2024 and beyond. And then on the digital side, we're about maybe a couple months away from launching a multiplayer version of the NBA Math Hoops mobile app, where students can actually play live with each other in real time from different locations. And we see that as a real opportunity to open up access to NBA Math Hoops to students in a very direct way. And so that's a big programmatic opportunity as well.
Okay. Just a quick question on that that new app with the Mossy player. Would that be only available to students who are currently in your program or just students in general?
Anyone can access that. So it's downloadable. Any human being who has a phone and is in most countries in the world can download that for free.
Okay. And then what would you say are some current things that LearnFresh has been doing to implement so that they can improve as a business?
That's a big question. Yeah, I mean, I would say a lot of things. They, again, centering around financial sustainability. So trying to make sure that we're always increasing the kind of cash reserve that we have access to, so that we can, operate with a sense of security and grow with a sense of security. Increasingly improve the benefits and resources that we have available to our staff, so they, feel like they can, be long-standing members of our team, and they feel like they're really well compensated. That's important for us, particularly in the nonprofit space where there's kind of a stigma around quality of compensation. We want to make sure that we're not feeding that from a negative standpoint. And then, programmatically, just continuing to be creative. I think one of the things that we've always been really good at is building good relationships with educators, building trust with educators and students, and then always kind of adding new elements to who it is that we are and what it is that we do. And so as our existing programs have become more and more codified and more formulaic, we've kind of reached into other areas to start thinking about other programs that we can add to the mix so that LearnFresh as a brand, as an entity, can always be fresh for educators and students. They can always look at us and expect something new. And so that's a big part of our future.
Okay.
And then so looking forward to looking at what we might be able to provide or help you guys out with, is there any area in particular of the business model? And obviously this is something that doesn't need to be decided now. We can address it later, but any area of the business model that you particularly would like us to focus on?
One that's interesting. First off, I would want whatever this is to be interesting and beneficial for you all in terms of what about our work do you find intriguing. But one area that I want to know more about, but just don't have a super full base of knowledge in, is just our ability to take future products and monetize them in some way. So EcoTour, for example, we have a performing artist who's actually on our staff. That's a whole nother story, but circumstantially, he just kind of grew up in the organization and he stuck with us while being a performer in this band that just had a top 40 hit last year, Lawrence. And we have had these conversations about partnering with artist tours to promote and potentially sell units of the EcoTour board game that's at the core of that program. We've thought about, opening up a sales model within kind of our store, or not an existing store, but within an online store that we could build out, and just starting to think about how, when we present our menu of options to teachers, and they can say, okay, well, I'll participate in NBA Math Hoops as a free program. I'll participate in the Major League Baseball program as a free program. The other products that are available are paid, and how can we motivate them to purchase those? That's something that we're really interested in thinking about. We just haven't had the time and energy and resources to investigate. So that might be something that is interesting to take a look at.
Yeah, definitely. We'll definitely bring that to the team when we have our meetings and, see if we can kind of harness our ideas together for that type of stuff.
Awesome. That's good.
And then looking forward to our communication going forward, how would you like to communicate? Weekly, bi-weekly, email, Zoom meeting, Slack? How would you like to go about that?
I would say, well, let me know what's helpful for you all. You all are doing a class project, so I want to make sure that I'm timely in getting information to you. It is sometimes helpful for me to just be able to jump on a call and answer a bunch of questions instead of having to like read through stuff and respond to an email or whatever. But I think it can depend upon what type of things you're asking and what type of feedback you need. So maybe starting with some sort of like biweekly call could be a good initial touch point, and then if you feel like that's not giving you the information you need, maybe we can adjust. Really let me know what would be helpful for you all.
Okay. And that pretty much sums up the questions we had. Were there anything else that you wanted to add? Things that you think we should know moving forward with this project, or just about Learn Fresh, about you, anything?
No, I think we covered everything pretty comprehensively, so I feel good about that. And no, I feel like we've hit everything.
Oh, that's great. We just want to thank you again for joining us, and safe travels as you're traveling, and we'll speak to you soon.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. So, let me stop recording.